Welcome to Ingirisi Mahathaya.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're diving into some source material today that is exceptionally sharp and, well, surprisingly poetic. It's this highly stylized piece of social commentary, delivered as a folk ballad, simply titled The Ballad of the Cop and the Lawyer. Yeah, it's short, it's punchy, and it just drips with cynicism about the whole legal structure. So our goal in this deep dive is really to analyze exactly how this poem manages to capture that complex relationship, often adversarial but undeniably intertwined, between law enforcement and legal counsel. We want to move pretty quickly but thoroughly through the text, trying to understand what the ballad suggests about the core mechanics of justice itself, and maybe critically who those mechanics ultimately serve, according to the poem.
Yeah, and what stands out immediately, I think, is that the text is much more than just a simple rivalry narrative. It's not just cop versus lawyer. It offers this fascinating, almost voyeuristic glimpse into their shared humanity and the underlying systemic dynamics between these roles. It really forces you, the listener, to sort of confront your assumptions about the necessary conflict, sure, but maybe more importantly, the necessary cooperation needed, to keep the gears of the court system turning smoothly.
Absolutely. And the poem kicks off with that real theatrical tension, doesn't it? They fought in the sun, right?
Right.
Very public spectacle of confrontation. Yet both claim allegiance to the law. And crucially, the ballad notes that both left believing they had won.
That phrase, both believe they had won, that sets the stage perfectly, I think. It sort of reveals that victory isn't necessarily about objective truth or, capital J justice. It seems to be more about professional success within the parameters of their jobs. Like, for the lawyer, winning might mean a procedural victory, getting something thrown out. For the cop, maybe it's just the satisfaction of processing the case, making the arrest stick. Regardless of the final verdict down the line, they kind of inhabit separate universes of what winning looks like.
And we see that separation so clearly in the physical things they use, the tools they wield. The ballad immediately draws this really stark contrast in the tools of their professions. One swung a baton, the other a file. It's literally the street versus the stack of paper.
It's incredibly eloquent shorthand, isn't it, for their opposing roles? The baton, well, that represents physical power, immediate enforcement, the kind of brute kinetic force of the state. Its purpose is control, often blunt, very visible. But then, conversely, the file, that collection of documents, precedents, motions, that represents pure procedural influence. It's the power of language, documentation, the manipulation of legal structure itself. It's invisible power, really, wielded in chambers, not on a street corner. The ballad captures this so well, saying the cop has power, but the lawyer has tongue.
But the question that raises for me is, which kind of power does the poem suggest is more, enduring, or maybe more impactful? The cop's power is immediate, physical, right there. But the lawyer's power, the power of the file, that can undo everything the cop achieved months, even years later. Is the poem maybe implying that the lawyer's power is inherently more, maybe corrosive because it's abstract, less visible?
That's a great point. I think the ballad suggests the lawyer's power is more systemic, deeply embedded. The cop enforces the rules the system lays down, often through, personal risk, physical danger. The lawyer navigates and, well, sometimes exploits the inherent complexity within those rules. They're both cogs in the machine, definitely. But one cog is sort of exposed to the elements out on the street, and the other is buried deep inside the machinery, manipulating the levers. And that difference in exposure, I think, leads us directly into the common ground they eventually find, this shared deep cynicism.
Exactly. Despite the public conflict, the baton facing off against the file, the ballad immediately suggests there's something deeper, a more disturbing connection. They might be rivals when the sun is up, under scrutiny, but maybe colleagues when the shadows fall. And the moral sort of crux of the whole text, the line that truly unites them in the dark, is that stunning admission. They sold the truth with a clever smile.
Oh, that phrase is just devastating, isn't it? Because it suggests the betrayal of the ideal of justice isn't some regrettable accident or a necessary evil. It's framed as a transactional process, performed with a clever smile. That implies deliberation, calculation, maybe even a degree of professional pride in their ability to manipulate the facts to shape the narrative. The cynical nature of that statement, it forces us to ask, what does selling the truth actually look like in practice for each of them? For the cop, maybe selling the truth involves, bending the facts just enough in an arrest report, or using procedural loopholes to secure a charge they know is maybe a bit flimsy. For the lawyer, it means using every linguistic trick, every delay tactic, every suppression motion available to, distance the court from the objective reality of what happened. It's kind of the same goal, selling the truth, but achieved through entirely different methods.
Wow. It sounds exhausting, actually. that level of performance, that constant compromise. And the ballad draws this explicit link between this morally compromised labor and its perceived dirtiness.
Yeah.
They both claim their job is filthy, but they experience that filth differently.
Yes, the poem definitely argues that operating within this system demands a price, whether it's physical or intellectual. The cop's dirty labor is characterized by physical strain, the literal grime of the street. My armpit stinks, I sweat for bread. That's effort, exertion, the smell of danger, the physical toll.
And the lawyer immediately fires back, claiming a different kind of pollution entirely.
Precisely. The lawyer counters with, my head's unclean instead.
That isn't sweat or street grime. It's the corruption of intellectual effort. It's the constant negotiation, the moral compromises that pollute the mind. The dirt here is internal, procedural, intellectual, very different feel. That raises a critical point for you, the listener, doesn't it? Is the poem implying that the dirt of physical labor is somehow more honest, or at least more visible, more tangible, than the internalized dirt of the intellectual compromise? I mean, they are both paying a price, clearly, but one pays with their body, maybe, and the other pays with their soul.
I think the poem suggests they're paying an equivalent price. They are equally contaminated, just by different vectors. So regardless of whether the labor is physical or intellectual, the act of serving this flawed system, it dirties the practitioner. The system seems to require both the stench of the street and the moral compromise of the mind to function, according to this ballad.
And we see that shared contamination, that equivalence, when the professional performance finally ends and the mask drops. After the necessary court confrontation, one armed with a warrant, the other facing the procedural weight of fate, they immediately shed their armor. They meet again, away from the legal arena, and the ballad says they laughed that night by the riverside, planning to wash both dirt and our foolish pride.
That riverside meeting is the moment of, well, honest revelation, isn't it? The foolish pride they aim to wash away. It isn't their dedication to the law, probably. It's more likely the professional arrogance, that illusion of moral superiority that each side has to maintain publicly. It's like an acknowledgement that their antagonism is largely theatrical, a requirement of their roles within the system.
And the next day, the theater just restarts, right there at the courthouse gate. The ballad describes their necessary professional interaction. They'll shake their hands, pretend it's fine, keeping up that public performance of antagonism. And then they go inside to share this deeply cynical ritual. They drink to justice.
And right here, we get the poem's most cutting metaphor about the system itself. The ballad frames the shared toast to justice as being like drinking old, cheap wine.
That's powerful imagery. Why old, cheap wine, do you think? Is it cheap because it's tainted, maybe? Degraded? Or is it cheap because it's just easily accessible, common, and therefore not sacred or special? Is there a subtle difference in that cynicism?
I think the power lies in both implications, really. It's cheap because it's common. It's not some rare protected vintage, which maybe means true. Pure justice is unattainable, just not on the menu. It's also old, suggesting that the cynical, transactional nature of the system isn't a modern failing. It's a persistent historical flaw. Been this way for a long time. So justice, as they experience it and dispense it, is something common, flawed, maybe even bitter to the taste. It's certainly not presented as something sacred or precious, more like a necessary but uninspiring routine.
And the reason it's cheap and common, well, that brings us to the poem's sharpest systemic critique, doesn't it? The ballad refuses to let the reader focus solely on the personal failings or the cynicism of these two figures. It immediately shifts perspective, detailing who they ultimately serve through all this.
Exactly. The poem states it plainly. Both serve the mighty, not the young. This is where the political commentary really hits its peak. It implies that their personal compromises, the sold truth, the cheap wine toast, are merely symptoms. Symptom as a structure designed specifically, maybe implicitly, to protect established powerful interests. The mighty. The conflict between the cop and the lawyer becomes, in this light, just noise, masking the true beneficiaries of the system.
So the distinction between the baton and the file, the street power and the procedural power, is ultimately kind of irrelevant. If they are both fundamentally dedicated to upholding a structure that favors the mighty, their professional antagonism is just necessary theater, a distraction.
It is a distraction, yeah. And maybe one that's profitable for the system itself, keeps things running. The system perhaps needs this conflict to maintain the illusion that it is fairly debating justice, you know, when in reality the outcome might often be predetermined by who has the resources to command the best lawyer or who the state decides to pursue with the most vigor, power dynamics.
Right. And this shared fate, this mutual contamination, this service to the mighty. It brings us to the poem's final statement. It's kind of redemptive, but still deeply cynical, statement on equality. They find common ground not in shared ideals about justice, but in the literal act of physical vulnerability, cleansing. The core insight here is that they state they will finally be equals when they bathe, when they wash armpit and head, becoming equals in soul and in bread. All the professional trappings, the badge, the suit, the file, the baton, the pride, it all vanishes when they are stripped down to their essential, vulnerable human selves, naked and wet.
The physical act of washing becomes this really powerful symbol of universal human equality. Simple, basic. When they wash armpit and head, they're removing the evidence of both kinds of that dirty labor we talked about, the physical sweat and the intellectual grime. And to be equals in soul and in bread, well, that suggests sharing a fundamental humanity, a basic need for spiritual rest, soul, and physical sustenance, bread, completely independent of their compromised careers and the roles they play. And that accompanying street chant really reinforces this universalizing idea, that chorus, watch the sweat, wash the brain, let the truth flow down the drain. It's such a powerful, almost irreverent summary of the whole ballad's themes.
Let the truth flow down the drain. It's just such a bleak line, but also resonant, isn't it? It suggests that truth, in the context of their shared roles within this system, is something expendable, something you have to actively discard to find peace, or maybe just equality between them.
It absolutely reinforces that idea that under the superficial differences, cop or lawyer, all the same, the chant says, their shared role in maintaining the system outweighs their professional conflict. The soap becomes the great equalizer. It washes away the badges and the files, the power and the tongue. And it concludes that outside of the corrupting influence of their professions, they just share one name: human.
So thinking about this, what does this entire text mean for us, the learner, trying to analyze the system from the outside? This ballad fundamentally suggests that the cop and the lawyer aren't opposites as much as they are two sides of the same tarnished coin, united by the necessary compromises, the dirtiness required to operate within a powerful, complex, and, the poem implies, potentially unjust structure. Their only real redemption, or maybe just relief, is found in briefly escaping that structure altogether, returning to simple shared humanity.
Which leaves us with a really provocative final thought, doesn't it? The ballad suggests that the whole professional distinction, the baton versus the file, it only really exists to serve the mighty, creating a necessary conflict for public consumption, maybe. But when they are stripped down, equalized in soul and in bread, the only thing left to wash away is that foolish pride. So we're left to wonder, is the system itself designed to ensure that the cop and the lawyer can never truly wash all the dirt off and maintain that equality? Or is their shared private cynicism the actual unavoidable price they pay for the temporary power their roles give them?
Thank you very much for watching.